what I was shown as a blueprint of what adulting was not serving me very well. And for me, that included a whole lot of escaping out of my own head in whatever form that took, right? So usually it was alcohol. And I remember very distinctly that my son, who's now 15, was asked, I don't even know how it came up during school, but they were asking about your parents' favorite food. And my son said, my dad's favorite drink is beer. And everyone chuckled, right? Like everyone laughed, but that was like a dagger. You start doing things you never thought you'd do before, and they don't hold true to the values you grew up with, or we all have this idea of ourselves and who we are as a person, but the reality is the truth. And my reality was I was a pretty shitty person at the time, and it was coming home and seeing people that weren't shitty as a reminder of what I should be. If I don't stay on top of things, left to my own devices without some accountability, I know myself enough that there has to be those kind of guardrails in place. But I'm going to be honest with you, like, you're talking about what consequence of habit means, and it depends on what season of your life you're in. If I'm completely honest, that could change for me throughout the day. It's probably not exactly what everybody wants to hear, but accepting the fact that sometimes life's uncomfortable. I still fight it, but as humans, we're naturally drawn to comfort. I heard you say how much you don't like running, yet you run ultra marathons, and to a lot of people that would sound just absolutely insane. But there is, that going back to that yin and yang, like there's got to be that pain and pleasure mix. We're meant to suffer, and if we're just constantly inundating ourselves with dopamine, you become unable to actually feel happiness. I've struggled with, am I actually living everything I'm talking about? Because it's at the same time, and talking about that, I think that's real. That's what people actually go through. So I like the scar tissue and the dented fenders and the stretch marks and the rust and all that, because that's real.
The Patina'd podcast is about the earned wisdom found in pain. It's about chasing failure, catching it, and using that as an opportunity. It's about scar tissue and sinew. It's about stretch marks and dented fenders and refusing to hide them. It's about pushing our insecurities and shame to the forefront instead of behind us. Instead of seeing rust as something that compromises a structure's integrity, we choose to see it as the grit that builds character. This is the Patina'd podcast.
All right. Well, welcome to another episode of the Patina'd podcast. Today, I'm very excited about our guest. So we have JT from Consequences of Habit. For those of you who are not aware of Consequences of Habit, we'll talk a little bit about it within this episode so that you are aware of it, because you need to be aware of it. And so, yeah, JT is a veteran. He's a first responder, or was a first responder. And like I said, the host and founder of a nonprofit called Consequences of Habit, which is doing incredible work. We're very much aligned from what we're trying to do and how we're trying to help people. Yeah, man. So happy to have you on, JT.
Man, it's a pleasure to be here, man. I was checking out some of your episodes when I was driving in and back from work today, man. And kudos to you. I know this, sometimes these things start off, it sounds like just a big love fest, but you and I, even before we hit record, we're talking about just the editing process, and just on a podcast level, man, you're doing some really great stuff. I love the intro. What is it, like scar tissue and dented fenders or stretch mark? Yeah. I'm like, oh man, I didn't quite know. I actually looked it up, what the definition of patina was. But that's actually for the best, right? Like that's what makes a good name. Yeah. It's like a song you hear and you're not quite sure if you like it or not, so you have to listen to it a couple of times. Those are the ones that usually stand out as your favorite songs of all time.
Yeah, I actually just had that situation happen yesterday with the song. Yeah. Okay, well, cool. I like to, with guests, when I have them on, I like to kind of go through their backstory, because through their own patina process, right? Like they started off in some way pure, coming out of a womb, and then life happens, and and
Yeah.
things happen as a result. And so, yeah, how was your upbringing?
Uh, so I grew up outside, about an hour outside New York City, in a place called Middletown, New York. And I mean, I guess I had a fairly normal upbringing. It's tough to say when you're actually living through it, whether, there was definitely some things that took some time and space to get away from to realize how dysfunctional they were. But uh, nothing, not, I mean, I will say that one of the things that was always in my life, there was a lot of great things, and I always have to be careful, like, all right, because when we tell these stories, a lot of times we tend to lean in on the tougher parts. But there was some great stuff about my childhood at the same time. But yeah, I grew up most of my life living outside New York City, and moved up to the Poconos in Pennsylvania when I was in high school, my sophomore year of high school. But I was an absolutely terrible student. I mean, horrible student. ADD. I mean, I barely squeaked by in school. I like, even the thought of a report card coming home just makes me sick to my stomach. And so I tried. I graduated high school barely. Tried college, that lasted less than a semester, and ended up going into the Air Force in '95. So I was living up in Scranton, Pennsylvania, getting in trouble. Got arrested while I was on delayed enlistment to go in the military. Not living my best life in a lot of different ways. So, you and I spoke a little bit before, I don't know, it was probably a week or two ago, kind of what I was shown as a blueprint of what adulting was not serving me very well. And for me, that included a whole lot of escaping out of my own head in whatever form that took. Right. So usually it was alcohol. So, I don't know how far into it you want to go right off the bat, but yeah. So I go in the military in '95. I spent a little over 5.5 years in the military, and then stayed out in California. I mean, maybe we'll bring it up to there, because you and I have some similarities of where we were in Sacramento.
Yeah. So, and even before we kind of go to that point where we have this crossing paths thing in Sacramento, so I was stationed in Fort Drum, New York, which isn't probably too far from where you grew up, right? Probably, I don't know if you're
Yeah, Fort Drum was up there, man. If I remember correctly, that was pretty far up north. So yeah, I was probably, well, not probably. I was closer south, kind of where New Jersey, New York, and Pennsylvania meet. I wasn't too far from there.
Yeah, you know the area better than me. I was thinking maybe it was about a 4-hour distance, but you might,
Oh, maybe. Yeah.
Somewhere in the area. And then, I was dumb enough to when I was in basic and they gave us a form of your dream places you want to go to. I'm a Yankees fan. And so I saw there's a place in New York, and I'm like, okay, well, I want to go there. Let's go to New York. I didn't realize it was Fort. I didn't realize what Fort Drum was, which was a pretty hardcore duty station where Air Force guys, when they came to Fort Drum, they got paid hazard pay just for coming to our like normal duty station, our normal in garrison spot. Air Force guys would get hazard pay, which is funny. But yeah, so Watertown, New York, up there, right across. It was fun for me being 18, 19, being able to cross the border into Canada and be able to drink in bars and that sort of thing. So,
yeah. I was stationed in North Dakota, so we used to do the same thing.
Yeah.
So I was about an hour I was up in a place called Minot, North Dakota. So we used to go up to Manitoba and throw some old Molson's back.
All right. And so you were in the military, and then while you're in the Air Force, is that what brought you to Northern California?
Yeah. Yep. So I'd gone from North Dakota, then I was stationed over in Turkey for 1.5 years, and then I ended up in McClellan Air Force Base in Sacramento. And while I was there, I tried out for Air Force Combat Control, which is I forget what the Army guy, you guys call it like ADT training or AIT training. So it was a long school, and I ended up getting injured in the school. That's why when I tell people I was in for like 5.5 years, people, it doesn't make sense. Most people think you just got in trouble and you got kicked out or something. So I'd gotten injured and I had extended my orders, my enlistment to be able to go to this school. And when that didn't work out, not just physically, but mentally, I'd really punched out. Right. So I got out in 2000 and I was, like I said, I was in Northern California and then I just stayed. I don't even, I mean, when I say stayed, Kenny, I stayed in the same, I think I told you this on the phone. I stayed in the same barracks for like 6 months. The base closed while I was there. And I just lived in a closed barracks because they left the power and water on. And I just stayed in there. I was doing odd jobs here and there, just laying tile or doing landscaping or whatever was just paying the bills at the time. So yeah, that's what brought me to Sacramento.
And how does that work? So they allowed, I can't, I don't,
No, they didn't allow
so
anything.
you just stayed without them knowing, I guess.
Well, there was nobody there. So the base closes and the barracks, I had a key. I had kind of like a master key when they were closing everything up. I was one of the last people there. So you had to have this key to get into the rooms where they stored like the vacuum cleaners and stuff like that. So I'd gotten my hands on one of those. And I don't even remember exactly how it happened. I ended up just crashing at a buddy at a townhouse not too far from the base. But for a while, yeah, man, I was staying in the barracks. There was the security company that you probably know, Whack and Hut Security, and they took over working the gate.
Okay.
And those guys were cool with me, they always just kind of let me in and never gave me a hard time. And yeah, I mean, there was a shelf life on it, right? Like it wasn't going to last forever, but for a bit, it was
genius.
It was.
It's genius.
Yeah, I didn't feel much like a genius at the time. That's for sure.
I don't imagine you did. So how were you feeling about life at the time? You're homeless, but not homeless because you're staying on the Air Force's dime without their knowledge. So how were you handling life at that time?
Oh, yeah, I was a mess, right? So, like I said, I was a terrible student, barely got through school. But when I was in the Air Force, I excelled. And what I found, and I continue to find, that under a structured environment, I do pretty well, right? I know what the expectations are. I can be at the right place, do the right things, do all the work. And the Air Force had tricked me into thinking that I could do that on my own because I was getting these awards. I was getting promoted early. So I thought I had it all figured out. And so I get out in 2000 without any plan whatsoever. And I quickly found that I did not, the Air Force did not cure my ADD. There was no one to hold me accountable. So my drinking and whatever other forms of escape they ran wild for a while. So I wasn't like plotting for my startup was I was, sleeping in this closed barracks. It was, I was definitely in a downward spiral for sure.
Yeah. And for the listeners, McClellan Air Base is in Sacramento, not in the great part of town, but yeah. So when McClellan Air Base closed and it became a business park and they began to do a bunch of renovation on it, including all the irrigation within the area, switching from old galvanized rusted piping over to PVC piping and all that stuff. I was a part of all of that when it became a business park and building it up. So I was out of the military. I got out of the military and I was using meth and alcohol. I was working 16 to 18 hours a day. And one job was landscaping in the morning throughout the day. And then I would end that job somewhere around 3, go home, sleep for 3 hours, wake up, and then come and do security work at the McClellan Air Base all night. So I was out there chasing off other meth addicts who were trying to pull out copper wire from the abandoned buildings. So, yeah.
There were a lot of them there, man. That remember that whole area. Now I'm going back to 2000. But I just remember huge amounts. I hadn't been around meth before. But I went through EMT school because I thought I wanted to be a fireman when I got out. and I was an American River, I
Mhm.
think and I went to this EMT school, and I met other people in there, and they were working for like the fire service. They were doing like some of the seasonal forest fire things, and some of them were on meth. And I just remember like, this is crazy. They're like, I was coming from the military. Like we just drank, right? We drank a lot. And so that was a whole world that, I feel very fortunate that wasn't something. I'll just say I was lucky that wasn't something that I got involved in. Not, there was no moral high ground. I was just lucky.
Yeah, I'd say the same thing now about it's definitely a good thing that fentanyl wasn't a thing when I was using. Yeah, same. Like you've written, I'm probably sitting here today because fentanyl wasn't around then. All right, real quick. So in the theme of resilience, I have 2 challenges for you, the listener. The first challenge: if you find this interview insightful or interesting, you really like the content that is coming in, please like, follow, share, subscribe, all of those things within whatever platform you use. Tell a neighbor, tell a friend, talk to your cat about it. Like, let's get this out there. This show is real tiny, and the interviewees that come on this show and share their insight, their wisdom, it can help a lot of people. So the more that it can get out, the better that it can serve the mission that I'm trying to do, which is to normalize chasing failure. So the second challenge that I have for you is to invest 15 minutes of your time into a timeshare opportunity that I have for you. I'm just kidding. I'm not selling you a timeshare opportunity. But what I am doing is I want you to take 15 minutes of your time and invest that into another episode that I have done. Please help me know. What I'm hoping for is for you to come in the comment section and give me some good feedback. Maybe scrutinize me a little bit. Let me know how I can be better as an interviewer to help this show be more palatable for you. But this isn't all about me. How did you like the guest? What were some of the insights that you got from the guest? Leave that in the comments section as well. This is all good stuff. So within the theme of resilience, those are the 2 challenges that I have for you. Help me, help you, help the show. Let's get better. Let's keep growing. Thanks, guys. So what takes you into the next step of your process? So you're not feeling too good about yourself in this period of time, but then you go into EMT school. Is that the next step for you?
So that whole area that time frame was a bit of a blur. So I don't know how many different jobs I did, bounced around. I was living up in Auburn, which is north of Sacramento, and I was in a really dark place. I don't think I realized how dark a place I was in. I mean, I remember having like a panic attack once, and I'd never experienced that before. And 9/11 had happened, and I'd been out of the military, and I took my time in the military very serious, right? So, like I said, I was trying out for Air Force Special Operations. Like I was a pretty gung. I mean, for the Air Force, I was about as gung ho as you can get. You tell somebody in the Army or Marines that, and you got to give it the caveat. But I was into it, and so when this thing wasn't there anymore. And then the biggest event that happens, right, as far as national security goes, I was feeling a bit lost. Is an understatement. So, I was getting close to getting myself in some very serious trouble. You become what you surround yourself with, right? And I was coming very close to getting myself in a lot of trouble. And I was invited to a wedding in Annapolis, Maryland. And I had to come home, and I stayed on a sailboat with some friends. And now these people all drank a lot, but they're people that loved me and cared about me, and they were just good people to one another. I look at that as a really important time in my life, that event of going there and seeing the people talk to me in a certain way, talk to one another in a certain way. And it was like a light bulb went off, and I flew back to Sacramento. I had a Jeep Wrangler, and I sold everything I had. I mean, literally, like I sold the back seats to my Jeep and everything I had to like pawn shops and just whoever I could, because it's not like, this is going back a while. It's not like I was jumping on eBay and selling it, like however I could get rid of stuff. And I packed all my everything, fit everything to include my dog in my Jeep, and hit the road. And I mean, literally like overnight, just skipped out of town and drove across the country. And went home, went back to the East Coast, and that was part of my starting over. I mean, it's a long story, and as you know, it's not like this all of a sudden life was good, because I still had a fairly serious addiction to alcohol, and that would persist for a long time after that. But I at least had, was it Robert Bradley, or you're at the crossroads, and I had to make this decision, and luckily that's the way I went. Got back home, and started a new life, man. So
what was it that was being said to you on that trip that sowed a seed and got you to think in a different direction?
it wasn't what I mean, I just saw it was like a train wreck happening in slow motion. Like, you didn't have to look too far down the road to see what was coming for me. I saw people around me getting arrested. I saw the things that I was doing. You start doing things you never thought you'd do before, and they don't hold true to the values you grew up with, or we all have this idea of ourselves and who we are as a person, and but the reality is the truth. And my reality was, I was a pretty shitty person at the time, and it was coming home and seeing people that weren't shitty as a reminder of what I should be. Again, alcohol was, that hadn't come into the equation, or I should say, not drinking alcohol hadn't been, wasn't even a thought. But I knew something not good was going to be happening if I didn't do something extreme. And that extreme thing was sell all of your stuff and go home, because there's nothing here for me. Yeah.
And so you sell all your stuff and then you move back to New York then? Is that what home was for you?
I moved back to Pennsylvania.
Okay.
So I was in the Poconos. I reunited with an old girlfriend who's now my wife. We have 3 kids together, and I started working some crappy jobs, but I ended up getting a job as a park ranger for the state of Pennsylvania, and that was a fantastic job. It was seasonal, but I had to go through like the Pennsylvania Police Academy. And then back in that environment, I excelled. I did well. I mean, I was bartending when they lay you off at the end of the season, which you look back, and for somebody who's got an alcohol misuse disorder, it's probably the worst job to have. But I was always one of those guys that could, I always want to be careful with this. I was lucky in a lot of ways that I always rode that fine line of ruining everything. And I very well could have, but I didn't. And that got me into working for the DOD as a civilian, because I had this background with the military, and then going through this police academy. And then I've been in law enforcement, and I still am, right? So I'm still in law enforcement now to this day. So I've got 27 years in either federal or state law enforcement. But I hit my second rock bottom in about age 40, when my use of alcohol was completely compromising every major thing in my life, right? Everything that I hold most important to me, which is my family and my job, and my role as a father, all of these different things. So that was my next, I guess it's almost equivalent, like coming home and going to that wedding, where like I could see the crystal ball and what was coming, and had enough clarity to start making some changes. And honestly, we can get into it, but that's actually what led to Consequence of Habit. That was the seed that COH kind of came out of.
Yeah, I was just going to say, so, when you and I first spoke on the phone about a week ago or so, when I stumbled across you and the thing, I became like when I looked at your title, I'm like, oh, that's good. That's really good, because depending on your current mindset and where you're at in life will depend on how you see that title, and
Yeah.
for me, in the current version of myself, seeing consequences of habit, I see it as like, this is this positive thing. These are positive consequences as a result of habits that you wish to have in your life, like you want in your life, and then I think, well, how would I have thought about that 17 years ago? And I would have been like, okay, well, consequences of habit means all sorts of addiction issues, and all the consequences that come with the addiction issues. At the very least, like looking at yourself and being like, I can't stand the person I see in the mirror. I hate this person, and I don't want to be living with this person anymore. And so using the title of your podcast and the title of your nonprofit as a segue into this, like, what were the consequences of your habits then? And you kind of you were talking about that a little bit in a broad scope, but maybe being a lesser husband, a lesser father, a lesser whatever. But was there anything specific, or was it just a buildup of a bunch of things where it's like, okay, that light bulb moment, and then you get that clarity and you're able to project into the future, and you're like, if this continues, this is what my life's going to look like?
There was about 1,000 or more than that small moments. Like I've said before, like death by whiff ball bat. Like it just takes a really long time. And of course, there are some particular things that stand out. I mentioned earlier that it was about we're taught what it means to be an adult by the adults around us growing up. So I was taught that being an adult means that you drink on a regular basis. Even if you're successful, I always grew up thinking an alcoholic was somebody that was uh, passed out drunk. Right? I never thought it was the person that just came home every day and drank a bottle of wine, or 5 or 6 beers, or so. I realized that when I got older and I started seeing people that didn't live like that, like there is an alternative, right? But at the same time, I have 3 amazing kids, and I'm showing them that this is how you live your life. This is how you deal with a good day. This is how you deal with a bad day. Uh, this is just normal for people to drink every single day. And if it's a reason to drink more, well, you better take advantage of it. So there was a lot of shame around that. I remember very distinctly that my son, who's now 15, was asked. I don't even know how it came up during school, but they're asking about your parents' favorite food, and my son said my dad's favorite drink is beer, and everyone chuckled, right? Like everyone laughed, but that was like a dagger because he was right, right? He was right, and so that was there was a lot of shame around that, and it's like this constant vicious cycle. If you do something that causes shame, so you're in pain, you're in emotional pain. So, but there's a trick to get out of that, and it works really quick. And that was for me was alcohol. But and then there was just things in my in my marriage, and I also knew that I was one fender bender away, from potentially losing my job. There was just a lot of different things. And I've told this story a bunch of times, but I was standing in the back of a classroom. I was about to give a friend was giving a intel report for, there's something going on at work, and I was going to be called up front and I was going to wow everyone with my knowledge on something, because one thing I've always been good at is no matter how bad things are, I can present this image like I've got everything together. I was almost jealous of people when they when they drank so much, or their life just fell apart, because at least they were all in, right? Like I was half-assing both. And it's that like constant acting, which makes you feel slimy and not authentic. And I was walking from the back of the classroom to go up front when they called my name. And for whatever reason, the walls kind of came in on me, and I had a full blown panic attack. And I'm in a classroom full of some really type A, like go getters, like not somebody you want to have a really vulnerable moment in front of. And that was I couldn't even speak. Like I just broke out in instant sweat, and I pretended that I was clearing my throat, which was complete bull. And I was just stepping out of the classroom, and somebody followed me. Somebody who knows me well, and he's just like, "What the fuck? Just what was that?" I'm like, "I don't even know." And I look back at that, and I feel like that was a time that I couldn't present something like everyone could actually see me, right? Like this dysfunctional child, not this person that presented like they've got it together. And that was part of the process, and through counseling and marriage counseling. But I'm going to be honest with you, like, you're talking about what consequence of habit means, and it depends on what season of your life you're in. If I'm completely honest, that could change for me throughout the day, right? Like I still fight the need to escape, or I shouldn't say the need, but the desire to escape my own head. And, I fight technology addiction. There's, I have an operating system that doesn't like feeling a ton. So that's a constant battle. Like I could wake up today. I had a great day. I was productive, and, I work out, I do all my things. I'm like, all right, man, the consequence of my habit is I feel some sense of pride. I feel good about myself, but that can be, they could definitely have some dents in it through 2 hours of doom scrolling. Like it's like, it's so easy to escape these days.
That's really true. I appreciate that. And I love how you've done this throughout this interview. You're using the word escape to kind of give this broader picture of a core issue versus saying addiction, or versus kind of using the big ear catching phrases, because that's what's happening, right? Like you're escaping whatever it is at the time, whether it's discomfort, whether it's just the 30 seconds of boredom, or it's antsiness of wanting to find out, how that post went on Instagram, or whatever it is,
Yeah. So I started Consequence of Habit, and I was doing a podcast for another company, myself, because I did stand-up comedy on the side too, and myself and a friend of mine who does stand-up comedy hosted a podcast for a company called Kill Cliff. Kill Cliff is a energy drink. During that time is when I got sober. I got sober in 2019, and COVID happens. And that podcast went away, but I had this recording studio that I'm sitting in now, and all of this time, and I wasn't working a ton at the time, and my brain was just going, how like early sobriety is too, right? Like it's just on your mind all the time. And I kept thinking about like my habits, like, what do I do? Like this one thing I stopped doing, man, my life got exponentially better. Like I stopped doing this one thing of not drinking, and like not all of it, but a lot of my trauma cleared up. Like, well, what else? What other habits do I have? Like, what else? What? And then I want to hear other people's story, and it became a platform. I started bringing on like professional athletes and entrepreneurs and military personnel, and the more people I talked to, the more similarities I found, regardless of what the poison that they picked, right? Whatever their mode for escape was, they were all trying to get like not feel something, right? So, it starts off as wanting to feel good, but at some point it just turns into, I just don't want to feel. There's a difference. When I drank when I was 18, that was just to feel good. You get to a point and maybe you feel good for the first, I don't know, couple of drinks, but after that, it's just not to feel. And so many people, you said, hey, I'm just really glad I didn't find fentanyl or something harder, because the consequences probably would have been, death, because that form of escape is just so freaking dangerous. But I'm kind of fascinated by the amount of ways there are to not sit in your own head, and then how do we fight that? How do we mitigate that? Because it's, like we're the richest country in the world, but we have the highest rates of anxiety, depression, addiction, preventable disease, and suicide. Like something's going
Mm-hmm.
on. Like something's
Yeah.
so. Uh,
And what do you find, like, in your experience since starting COA and getting sober and trying to build up this wider array of coping skills, what do you
yeah,
find is working for you?
this isn't. It's probably not exactly what everybody wants to hear, but accepting the fact that it's going to be uncomfortable. Sometimes life's uncomfortable. I just got really. I still fight it, but I as humans, we're naturally drawn to comfort. I heard you say how much you don't like running, yet you run ultra marathons, and to a lot of people that would sound just absolutely insane. Uh, I don't run ultra marathons, but there is, that going back to that yin and yang, like there's got to be that pain and pleasure mix. There has to be something. And I think everyone's wired different and not everyone will understand that. But the same reason I'll say this, I've talked to a lot of people that were hardcore into sabotaging themselves through the intake of whatever it is. They're also some of the most hardcore people going the opposite way. And when we think that pain and pleasure is processed in the same place in the brain, I guess it shouldn't be all that surprising. But yeah, so one, accepting the fact that life can really suck sometimes, or it can be painful at times. Trying to remind myself you don't have to run away from that every time it pops up. That you can sit in that. Again, sometimes it's easier than others. And then connecting my actions with what I'm actually feeling, right? That was for a long time. I didn't do that. Like I had to put my dog down last month, and all I did was want to disappear into my phone or social media or anything but to feel. So I'm connecting that, right? I mentioned before we got on, my son was had an injury, and it was the first time I've seen him like this. He's 15, and we're in the emergency room, and we got done with that, and all I want to do is get out of my own head, right? So making those connections, because at least you understand what the hell's going on.
Mm-hmm.
But and then when you made a good point, things that make you feel good quick are probably not going to be good for you. It's accepting it's the consistency. It's doing that thing that is right, but over, it's got some compound interest in the end, that there's going to be some changes. It's not going to happen as quick as throwing down 3 shots or smoking whatever it is. And that at the end of the day, there's going to come a level of self-pride that you're never going to get from some quick dopamine thing that makes you feel good short term. Because you mentioned hating yourself, because at some point, that's what all of those things, we're meant to suffer. And if we're just constantly inundating ourselves with dopamine, you become unable to actually feel happiness in the same way. It's like not eating sugar for a period of time. When you have that something sweet, you're actually going to take it in. Like you were in the Army, you probably went, I don't know what your MOS was, but at some point you were on some bivouac or something and didn't shower for a period of time, and then that first time you step into a hot shower, well, that feels unlike most showers you're ever going to have in your life, right? Like there's that beauty in not having instant access to that, because you actually appreciate it a little bit more when you've got it. That was the most long-winded answer ever, I think. I don't even know if I made sense.
There was a lot in that. The importance of suffering, like how we're meant to suffer, because I think that word suffering, a lot of people don't handle it well. Even people that are highly, highly resilient don't like the word suffering. I talked to Ed Eddinghausen, and him and I had a little bit of a back and forth on it, and he has a different kind of view with it, and I'm like, I just want to normalize the word suffering and make it okay, and not
Yeah.
only make it okay, make it mandatory, and know that we're supposed to go through it. And I was talking with a client and about nutrition and stuff, and I was explaining to him, I like, he's like, you don't understand, I really really like food. So like you don't get it. I'm like, no, I get it. Like I probably like food as much as you. I can't say I like food more than you, but I'm telling you, I really, really like food. I've lost a lot of weight, but that doesn't mean I don't like food anymore. And so I remember explaining to him, I was like, look, when you eat a pizza, it's pizza. When I eat a pizza, it goes along with, because I just ran 20 miles, or
Yeah.
it's my birthday, or it's something. It's a very very special rare occasion, and when I eat it, you'll plow through 4 slices. When I eat it, I've just gotten maybe to the crust, right? Like I'm sitting and I'm savoring it, because I know I'm not going to get it for a long time again. I'm really enjoying it. And there's something to that where um abstaining from things for almost purely for the sake that you can enjoy it when you get it. Now, if you're an alcoholic or an addict, like for me, I should never, and just there is no breaking that abstinence, right, for me. But when it comes to other things where I can bring within the realm of control in my life and not completely have the threat of throwing everything away, and I can still enjoy it in pieces, then there's that time of having some abstinence in between it, right? So,
Yeah. I should be way better with the food, uh, but a couple points. One of the things I learned, just because I quit alcohol does not mean I'm not, uh, I know I accept the way my brain works. And that means I accept that whatever makes me feel good, that I will go after, like I will probably overindulge on that thing. Right. So, I mean, I said this to my wife, my therapist not that long ago. Like, I feel like I relapsed in some ways because I was just chasing these things that made me feel good, but it had nothing to do with
mm-hmm.
alcohol. Like that, like it's just, if I don't stay on top of things, left to my own devices without some accountability, it's, I know myself enough that I there has to be those kind of guardrails in place, and that's just me. And then the other point is, we're not. Am I allowed to curse on here
Good.
or no? If not, then yeah, all right. Like, we're not that fucking unique. So when someone tells me like, no, you
Mm-hmm.
don't understand, like I've interviewed over 150 people on our podcast about habits, and we are beautiful, complex animals in some ways. You know, we can put like, we can now land a rocket ship back on Earth straight up and
Mm-hmm.
down. Like we're, but at the same time, we got these loopholes, and we're not that complicated. Like, we all love food. we you love dopamine is what you like. You love, and we all love that in whatever form. And you know, so I've had lots of people say that, like, the more they've taught, the more they've kind of dug into their addictions, the more you find these similarities where I spent most of my time separating myself, especially with somebody else who had admitted to an addiction. Deep down, I knew I had the same thing, but I could separate myself from them. I mean, it's one of the main reasons people don't go to 12-step programs, where they start and then go, well, that's not me, because the person's wearing a hat that they don't agree with, or doesn't look like them, or isn't the same color or in the same tax bracket. But at the end of the day, we're just a bunch of people trying not to do this thing that makes us feel like crap about ourselves.
Yeah. And so, kind of talking about that. So you said you've had what, over 150 guests or something like that, which is
Yep.
incredible. And so all of them around the theme of habit, and assuming the theme of trying to attain better ones. So within the realm of habits, what would be the most practical protocol to help start building up habits?
One, I would start off by, I would tell somebody to read like Atomic Habits. There's 2 books. I would tell people to read Dopamine Nation by Dr. Anna Lemke, and I would say read Atomic Habits. Dopamine Nation Dr. Anna Lemke does an amazing job in pointing out how our bodies, how they react to constant dopamine all the time, just constantly feeling good. Atomic Habits does a good job in mapping out ways to make these little changes in our lives. Now, I want to say that I've talked to a lot of people. I've read a lot of books. That does not mean that I follow through on all of these things, right? There's a couple of things that I know work for me. I know if I don't work out for a couple of days in a row, that I don't feel very good and I can become irritable. I found breath work, like a Wim Hof style breath work, early on in my sobriety, and that is still something that I practice almost daily. Even if it's just 1 or 2 rounds of that, it kind of slows my brain down. You hear people say like, I'm not very good at meditating. I get it. This is kind of like a rocket ship for me to get some of those thoughts, the constant going, talking to myself, that conversation. It can slow all those things down. And you hear journaling, but it's so freaking powerful if you actually do it. It's not, it's not always convenient. It's not always fun, but if you do it for whatever reason, there's this, and I'm not talking about on your phone. I'm talking about like with a piece of paper and I love these mechanical pencils and you just start writing. It's kind of amazing what kind of comes out when you start doing that. I've gone back and read some of my stuff from not that long ago. I'm like, wow, I wouldn't have been able to express that in words. It had to be go down, and I hate writing, but for whatever reason, I put it down on paper. So yeah, as far as the habits go, man, start small. People talk to can you imagine ultra marathon Kenny who runs 100 miles talking to Kenny who says, I can't run because I have bad knees? You would seem like another species. You know what I mean? So making sure people know that you, just like the other guy that says, I'm different because I really like food. You can do the same thing everyone else does. It's just, there's going to be these like little steps you have to take. And it's very easy to say, hey, this person is built different than me. They're just different. There's no way I can do those things, but start small, man. And over a period of time, it's amazing what you're capable of if you just add that consistency and you'll start believing in yourself over a period of time, unlike any other way you could from likes on social media or, your friends at the bar or whatever.
Do you feel like because like you've placed yourself in a role to be somebody that has value within this framework of consistently doing hard things or building yourself up to be accountable to yourself for others around you, this type of dynamic, right? Because that's what your podcast is around. That's what the nonprofit is kind of based in, is to try to help other people and first responders and veterans in that same world, right? Do you feel like it gives you an additional source of accountability by putting yourself up in this role? Has this role that you've placed yourself in life helped you become more effective in the desirable areas of habits that you want for yourself?
Yeah, I know where you're going, because I've actually asked this kind of this question in certain ways, or because it can go both ways, right? Like, because there's times that I felt that I'm not being authentic because I'm not doing everything that I'm talking about, and I try and be pretty open about that. I don't, like, I have my own struggles. Like, the whole point of this thing was kind of like document it in real time, or at least to be as honest as I could, because I felt like there was a disconnect with the Jocko Willings. And that's not a negative to anyone who actually lives that life. But I feel a connection to people who are trying to make changes, that struggle is kind of real, and to build this kind of community around like-minded people trying to do the same thing. Because I used to surround myself with people that drank all the time because I didn't feel bad about myself when I did that, because they all did the same thing. So the whole point of COH is to bring awareness to the impact that habits have on our mental health and our success and the environment. So the more I talk about that, one, yes, it has helped me make improvements in my life. And I can honestly say without a doubt that without being sober, none of this would have happened. Mm-hmm. Right. Like, just like you were kind of saying in your some of the things in your opening, like spending 40 years of my life not being able to not do this thing, or, probably not 40, but 20, whatever, however long I drank, has given me insight that I never would have gotten otherwise. So that COH starts, and yes, I've surrounded myself and put myself in a position that, one, I feel an obligation to be on, to hold myself accountable. But at the same time, it's, if I'm completely honest, there's been times where I don't like to use the word fraud anymore. I used to use that, but I've struggled with, am I actually living everything I'm talking about? Because it's at the same time, talking about that, I think that's real. That's what people actually go through. Right? Like if you just talk to me, I'm like, I got nothing but good habits for you. This is all I do. As I get up at 4:30, I journal, I work out, like most people, there's enough of that out there on social media, and I don't think most of it's real. So I like the scar tissue and the dented fenders and the stretch marks and the rust and all that, because that's real.
Yeah. Okay. So I want to talk about COH a little bit and kind of your mission, because I think I say this with clients who are single and wanting to date, like, healthy attracts healthy, unhealthy attracts unhealthy, healthy also attracts unhealthy, but the healthy notice the difference. And so within what you started building up with COH is it seems like you have really cool companies coming on board because they see what you're doing. So they're attracted to it, right? They're attracted to what you're hoping to do with it. And then, and so you turn it into a nonprofit, which is really, really cool. So I want you to kind of talk a little bit about COH, the nonprofit, sure. And I guess you can talk about how it started off.
Yeah, so it started off as a podcast. I told my story, started inviting other people on to tell theirs. It was a platform for them. And then about a year into that, it grew fairly fast. And then I said, I want to do something more. Like, people would reach out and say, hey, that guest you had on really spoke to me. I love that episode. And that's fantastic. But I wanted something more. I wanted I wanted an actual event where people can go to, or courses people can take. And so a year after the podcast started, knowing absolutely nothing about a nonprofit, I just put the paperwork in, got a board together real quick. We got this nonprofit going. And now we hold workshops. Usually we hold speaking events and workshops. We're about to start a 10-week habit mastering class. I've been fortunate enough that, like you said, I've had amazing people jump on board, people way more qualified than myself. And that's been a gradual process. I think the first year we brought on a guy named John McCaskill, who was a retired Navy SEAL commander, who was teaching mindfulness and meditation, and Dr. Teresa Larson. We flew them out to give a presentation to first responders. And that was my first kind of eye-opening experience that this stuff like that costs $10,000, right? Like, to hold one event for the day. I'm like, yeah, Originally, my original thought was like, I'm going to start a nonprofit and get people into recovery, people that were like me, that maybe they couldn't afford it. And then I saw, well, recovery costs like $30,000 to $60,000 a person. And that was for one person. So I like this idea of, all right, well, maybe we catch it on the front end, right? Maybe we catch it when people can make that, they can start to understand the impact that these habits have on their lives. Like, just doing this thing one more time to make me feel good, which will turn into the next and the next. The outcome has already been worked out. Like that, we've run the experiment a million different times, so we know what's going to happen, right? And it's not good. So maybe we start finding ways to help people make these small changes in their lives. So now we've done a lot of workshops around the Wim Hof breath work or cold exposure. We brought in Nick Lavery last year for a speaking event, him and Zach Clark. But Nick Lavery is a Green Beret, lost his leg in Afghanistan, and he trained back up on a prosthetic, and he retook the test and went back on an active SF team with a prosthetic. And people go, what the hell does that have to do with habits? I go, look, those same things. Like, here's the thing about habits. It's such a double-edged sword. Like, you got good habits, bad habits. Like a lot of the guests I've had on the podcast, they haven't had a problem with alcohol. Maybe they've just been successful, but it's just those habits that got them there. So yeah, that's kind of been the evolution of it, with the hopes of having chapters across the country, holding larger events. I was very fortunate the Athletic Brewing Company got on board early on, not because they saw what we were doing and we're like, wow, that's great. I ended up becoming an ambassador for them, and then slowly over time, they got on board and they've been huge supporters of us. Patriot Fund is another company. Fuel Hunt is another one and one of the founders of Fuel Hunt is now a board member. So that's been the evolution of the nonprofit. And to be completely honest, like there's so many lessons I'm learning every single day of things I've not done right, or we as an organization haven't done right, and that's been a fun process of kind of learning all that. I retire from my current job in 2 years, and I'd really like to see Consequence of Habit as a foundation really grow and be able to hold, week-long events, or we have a rocking event going on right now for the month of June, and hold events like that where you and maybe some coworkers or friends can get together and start practicing these healthy habits together, and you do it over a period of time. You start to make that connection. Like, I feel better about myself. I look better, all of these things, but there's value in doing that with somebody else. Like, we like this idea of building connection through a shared purpose and challenge. Like, I'm sure when you run 100 miles and everyone else that ran 100 miles with you guys just shared something that very few people ever will. And you're going to have a connection. You may not even like that person, but you're going to feel a connection with them because you've experienced that together. So if we could help facilitate that in any way, that's a win for us.
Yeah. I love it, because you're doing what I would hope to be doing at some point. Because I've talked with you about Fund Rent for One and that sort of thing. And it's anyway, there's like, I can't do it unless I get a program to partner up with me. Right. Like, because I'm not going to raise $30,000, right? Like, it's not going to happen. So like, at least currently it's not going to happen. So I'm going to need a company, a program to be willing to bite that, right, and eat that
Sure.
loss.
Yeah.
But yeah, at some point it's like, can that continue to grow out? And as I've envisioned it, it's a lot of what you've just talked about today. It's like week-long courses, or like these sort of get in, do the work, put your feet on the ground, and see that you can do something that you didn't think you could do. Like, teach yourself that you can do something that you otherwise would have thought there's no way I could do it,
Yeah. Right. That's what getting sober was, right? That's for everyone. Like, most people think they never can do it because they've been doing it for so long in their life. And that's why I'm we have some amazing athletes. So we have about 30 ambassadors across. You just had Eric on your podcast, and we have Taylor Spike's an ambassador for us, and people doing amazing things. And I'm always impressed by that. And I'm just as impressed by I've told this story a ton of times, but we have a triathlon that goes right by my house, and I'll see somebody that's clearly not been a triathlete their entire life. They're on like a big store bought Schwinn. Their consequences of their habits are apparent in their Lycra, but they're doing it, man. Like they're out there just like everyone else. And those are, I don't want to put words in their mouth or thoughts in their head, but I guarantee that there's times where that person said, I could never be a triathlete. I could never do that. But given the right circumstances, given just being fed up with what you're doing, and then given the right environment and support around you, people are like, fuck it, I'll try it. I'm so inspired by that.
Yeah, I think it's incredible what you're doing. I'm excited to see what's going to happen with COH in terms of as a nonprofit, where it's going to go in the next 2 years. But then when you're able to get, have more time and you're able to fully delve yourself into it from a time perspective, I'm excited to see where it goes. Well, we talked about this offline, but it'd be cool to see if there's something that we could partner up on in Northern California. That'd be awesome.
Oh, hell yeah.
But,
man, I would love it. Like, one thing is I don't make any money from COH. This doesn't pay my mortgage. And I don't say that with like this big sense of pride. I say it because it allows freedom. In the nonprofit world, not always, but there is this thing about hey, there's this limited funds out there. They don't work with a ton of other ones because it's all about where's the money coming from. We've partnered up with other nonprofits. We're going to continue to. So if there's ever a chance, Kenny, we can do something even sooner than later, we're in. We're in. You and I have, I believe, a lot of synergy, not just in the fact that we were both either drunk or high at McClellan Air Force Base, but in what we're doing now. And I'd love to see us partner up on something in the future.
Yeah, dude. Well, I really appreciate you coming on. I think there's probably another episode in the future of having you come on. I'll be coming on yours, but I mean, okay. Even with you just coming on here and explaining more as COH continues to have things, like by the time this episode comes out, the current event you have going on is going to be over, but there will be something again in the future. I'd like to plug that for you, but yeah.
Sure. And if you don't mind, we have a speaking event in Wilmington, Delaware on October 5th, where we're going to bring in Nick Lavery again and another just insane story, Green Beret, but because of his consequence of his habit, he lost his Green Beret and his tab, and it's now gone on just to help other veterans kind of going through addiction issues. So yeah, we got some stuff coming. So consequenceofhabit.org is where you would find all of our events, and we've got some other resources there, some meditation, some other breath work stuff. So yeah.
So yeah, man, I really appreciate having you on. This was really fun, and we'll stay connected, dude.
Awesome, man. One last thing, Kenny. Maybe this is for offline, but the editing, all the little video stuff you're doing, I'm 150 episodes in. I'm freaking jealous. I'm like, why didn't I know about this? You're doing a really great job with it, man. So, and thanks for allowing me to come on here and tell my story.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Patina'd podcast. There are other shows that emphasize resilience, but my intent is to normalize personal development through embracing challenge by interviewing the common man and woman, the person that you and I can relate to. If you are someone who wants to soak up the insights of normal people doing extraordinary things, please subscribe. If you know somebody who is overwhelmed by fear and complacency, please share this podcast with them. I'm your host, Kenny Hill, and I run a private practice near Sacramento, California called Recovery Hill.
My website is in the description tab along with my social media links. The intro music was Two in the Back, performed by Sunday at Slim's on Blue Dot Sessions.
We're chasing shadows in the light, embracing failures, wings take flight.